Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your weekend here on a Friday morning. Fall has arrived. It's cool. Just took the Bentley, the Bulldog, out for a walk. He's looking good. He's lean. He's in shape. I see a lot of people outside enjoying it in good moods. Why? Folks, the Broncos are playing well. And if you don't think the mood of the state is connected to the Broncos, as someone who's lived here for 5 decades, I would vehemently disagree with you. When the Broncos are doing well, a lot of people are feeling better about themselves. And the Broncos, after this 8-year nadir, this 8-year abyss, there's something to like. They're 3-2. Sean Payton, the culture he's established, the system he's established, it feels like it's working. Their defense is, conjuring up memories of the 2015 team. And now they play the Chargers, a second straight AFC West game. Sean Payton versus Jim Harbaugh. And that's an interesting matchup on a number of levels. Not only is it in division, Broncos trying to improve to 3-1 overall in the AFC West, which is huge when you involve tiebreakers. These two are up for the Broncos job. Would history have been different if Jim Harbaugh got the job and not Sean Payton? Would it have changed the course of history in college football? Perhaps. The Broncos are in a good place, folks. Offensively, they need help. They're going to have to get another weapon at some point. You can see that in my column in the Denver Post. But they're playing great defense. They're protecting the ball. They're playing the field position game. They're winning in the margins. And now they face a team on Sunday that looks almost identical to them in how they're trying to win in the Chargers. So who has it better? The Broncos or Chargers? Payton or Harbaugh? We're going to get to all of it after the break. Have you been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work? Give my friends at Hoggett Injury Law a call. You see that logo down there in the big A setup for Hoggett Injury Law? Listen, their motto, it's personal. That's because it is. I've known Darby Hoggett forever. I became his good friends. He encouraged me to do this podcast. I'm so happy he did. Many of Darby's clients become his good friend. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. So again, if you've been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work, give Darby's team a call at 1-833-HOGGATT. That's 1-833-HOGGET, or visit the website at hoggettlaw.com. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during games. With the latest catalog of odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, NBA, to even political props. When the game's over, head on over to their online casino and get in on a game, maybe a blackjack or poker, or just unwind with one of their over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online. The game starts here. Welcome back, folks, to the Broncos Pod with Troy Renck. I'm your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. As I mentioned before, I've got a column up right now about how the Broncos, if they win this game, they're going to go 5-3. They've got to go out and get T. Higgins if he's available. And if it's not T. Higgins, it's Amari Cooper as a rental. It's Austin Hooper as a tight end. They cannot reach the playoffs without adding an offensive weapon. Josh Reynolds, I don't think, plays this week. He's been dealing with multiple injuries, a hand, and he's dealt with hamstring and leg issues. It's too much to ask Devon Vele, who's been a healthy scratch, to come in and caffeinate this offense. And they're getting nothing from the tight end. Greg Dulcich was a healthy scratch. That experiment's over as far as I'm concerned. Now, maybe Lucas Kroll shows us something, but if they win this game, their next two are Thursday night in the homecoming for Sean Payton in New Orleans, and then hosting Carolina Panthers, the worst team in the league. At worst, after these 3 games, they should be 5-3. They're in the playoff mix right there. I thought they were a team in the transition. So you're saying, why would you do this? Why would you trade? Listen, if you trade for T. Higgins, it's probably going to take a 3rd rounder. He's 25 years old. He's 3.5, 4 years younger than Sutton and Reynolds, with the idea that after the season, you sign him to a long-term deal as your number 1. It's not a rental if I'm getting T. Higgins. I have an understanding. Now, you can't do it during the season because he's on that franchise tag. So any team acquiring him, the same rules apply where you can't negotiate a long-term deal during the season with a player on the franchise tag. But I would be talking to his agent Now, again, they have an easy path to get back in it, even at 1-4. They're like Giants, Browns, Eagles, easy home games. They could easily be back in it. So he might not be available on November 5th. But Broncos have to be considering going to get a weapon. And again, it's not sacrificing the youth movement to do it. We're not trading 3 1s for somebody for a rental. Amari Cooper is way cheaper. It'd be like $600,000 because they restructured his deal. And that's minimal cost for it's a basically veteran minimum. But he's 30, he'd be a rental. I would not be looking to re-sign him. But a guy like T. Higgins at 25 to be my number 1 next year, that's a move. Again, that's a forward-thinking move, not just for this year, which suggests you're a little ahead of the plan in terms of rebuilding, but that's a next year move and the year after move with a guy like Higgins because of his age and production. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This week matters. This week is huge in this equation, in this calculus, to get to 5-3. Because you lose this week, you could easily go 1-2 because the Saints game is going to be difficult on the road. Now, again, likely to be starting Spencer Rattler, the rookie. That helps tremendously. Derek Carr's not a great quarterback, but he's played well against the Broncos throughout the years. And he's now hurt with an oblique injury. But if Sean Payton, if you can beat the Chargers and you're the Broncos, and you go 2-1 in this stretch, you're 5-3, maybe even go undefeated. I think that's a little ambitious. I don't know that this team, when I look at it, is capable of going on a 6-game heater. But they're doing it, folks, in the same ways they did it last year during that 5-game win streak. Remember last year, during that streak, 16 takeaways, only 3 giveaways, so a plus 13. They're plus 3 during this 3-game win streak because Bo Nix is not turning the ball over, and he's not taking sacks. Bo Nix is starting to connect more and more with Sean Payton, starting to call the game that fits his skill set. One-side reads, RPO, use his legs, all the stuff we wanted to see during the season that we saw during the exhibition games, we're starting to see more of that. And as Bo starts to learn more and control the line of scrimmage, checking in and out of plays, that's where this evolution starts with he and Sean Payton. But it's starting now because Bo Nix has figured out ball security is job security. You protect the ball when you have a very good defense to great defense. You can win in the NFL right now. You can win. Is it sustainable where the Broncos are giving up touchdown drives on like 12% of drives? No, that's not sustainable. And that's why the offense has to start carrying its weight. But this week, it's going to be an old school, throw down the sawdust, put on the bare knuckles, a brawl, because the Chargers and Broncos are basically the same team. Chargers have a top 10 defense. Broncos have a top 5 offense. Both teams, based on the last few weeks, are going to want to run the football. And that is going to be a field position game, a special teams game, a 1 turnover game that wins it in a very tight, low-scoring game. Who wins that game between Payton and Harbaugh? Who has it better? And folks, when I say that, you know it's the same for the Harbaugh family. Nobody. Who has it better than us? Nobody. Well, if you think back to before Payton was hired, who was the Broncos' number 1 choice? It was, in the form of a question, who is Jim Harbaugh? When Greg Penner talked at the Nathaniel Hackett firing, and thank God logic intervened and he pulled the ripcord on Hackett, who has just been stripped of his OC duties. His last 3 jobs, just in case you're wondering, stripped of OC duties and fired to Jacksonville, fired after 15 games in Denver, stripped of his OC duties after 9 games in Denver, stripped of his OC duties after a season and a half in the Jets. Maybe he's just not an offensive coordinator and his skill is friend of Aaron Rodgers. I'm just saying. My word. But when the Broncos looked for a head coach, and specifically Greg Penner, he wanted toughness. He wanted physicality. He wanted accountability, discipline. Jim Harbaugh, check, 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 check. He was their guy. They flew out. They met with him. They thought they had a deal. They thought he was going to do it. They flew back out, is my understanding, according to sources, at least Greg Penner, trying to secure the deal. And ultimately, Jim Harbaugh decided, looking at his Michigan roster, he wanted to stay and proved perfect timing for him. He won a national championship. He will be forever beloved in Michigan as a former player who took over the program, rescued it from its depths of 5, 6, 7 win seasons, made them nationally relevant again, and won a national championship. So he made the right decision. He had the quarterback, he had the players. I mean, he had basically like 10, 12 NFL guys, including an NFL quarterback and J.J. McCarthy. It was his job, folks. Don't be confused. The Broncos' job was his job if he wanted it. This wasn't the Vikings thing the year before where I feel like he got the vibe. They didn't totally want him, and they weren't going to wait around until he turned them down. So he wasn't even a finalist for the Vikings job the year before, whereas in this situation, it was his job if he wanted it. So the Broncos pivoted back to Sean Payton. He's their guy. Then all of a sudden, they interviewed DeMeco Ryans, and throughout the entire process, they had no interest in hiring a first-time head coach again after the disasters of Vance Joseph, Vic Fangio, and Nathaniel Hackett. But they were so blown away by Ryans, they wanted him. And Ryans told him, hey, I'm going to Houston. I got to interview in Houston. His wife wanted him to interview there. She wanted to live there. He played there. And once they couldn't get him to agree to a deal when he was in the building, they knew when he got on a plane to go to Houston, it was over. It was over. And then Sean Payton becomes number one again. So he went from being second to Harbaugh, then third when it was Harbaugh, Ryans, Payton, then second again when Harbaugh was out and Ryans emerged, and then won. But it appears, well, there's been certainly some uncomfortable moments and angst. Payton might be the right guy. Because if they had hired Jim Harbaugh, if you follow me through on this, I would have loved Harbaugh. I don't know from a media standpoint, but everywhere he goes, he wins. And I remember researching it when they were going to interview him. This guy, he took over the University of San Diego program, made him relevant. Stanford made them one of the toughest teams in the country, where they're beating USC when USC was, one of the dominant teams in the last decade at that point. Then he goes to the Niners and gets them to NFC championship games, winning, turned the whole program around, makes Alex Smith a functional quarterback. And obviously, with Colin Kaepernick, he found lightning in a bottle and nearly won a Super Bowl with him, losing to his brother, John Harbaugh, and the Ravens. It's the only thing he hasn't done. That's the reason for me he's back in the NFL, is that's the last piece of this. He's been a great NFL college player, great NFL player, and he won a national championship at Michigan. He's resurrected multiple programs and been a great NFL coach. The only thing he hasn't done is won a Super Bowl. But if he had come here, I will argue this. As much as I think it would have worked out over the long haul if he stayed, which he's never really been a long haul guy in the NFL. He kind of rubs people the wrong way after 4 or 5 years. If he stayed, you know who else probably stays? Russell Wilson. Jim Harbaugh is just corny enough, just smart enough to think he could have fixed Russell Wilson. And so the first year with Harbaugh and Wilson, if they go, let's say 22 touchdowns, 8 picks, and he was 26-8 under Payton, he's keeping Russell Wilson, I believe, because his personality is much more, there's much more versatility in how he sees the world and meshes with Russell Wilson than there was with Sean Payton and Russell. Sean Payton and Russell Wilson were diametrically opposites when it comes to personality. Sean's kind of mischievous, a smartass, can be an asshole. We all know that. Jim Harbaugh is like an old school football, cornball, drinking milk, eating peanut butter and jelly. You know who that kind of sounds like? Russell Wilson. Now, Russell has developed some diva characteristics, clearly, but I think those two would have gotten along. And so my concern, if you bring Harbaugh, is that Russell's still here and you're holding on to this pipe dream that a 35-year-old quarterback is going to be the one to lead you out of the canyon here. And it's not unlike the column I did a couple of weeks ago. Kind of, who would you rather have, Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers here with the Broncos, or Sean Payton and Bo Nix? And based on my emails and social media, most people say, hey, I'd rather have Sean Payton and Bo Nix, because what happens is if you extend, Rodgers is shown, it's all about him. It's another cautionary tale of giving too much power to an aging quarterback. The Broncos did it with Russell Wilson, acquiesced to all his demands, and it blew up in their faces. The same thing's happening with the Jets with a 40-year-old quarterback who's got way too much power. And I just don't think football is his priority right now, not like Tom Brady. And I can certainly speak to Peyton Manning, whom I cover. It was an obsession. I don't sense that with Rodgers. I don't sense him waking up every second of every day and thinking football like those guys did. And Russell Wilson is a similar situation here. Just absolute disaster. Had too much power. But if Harbaugh's here, and let's say last year they go 8-9, and then this year they go 10-7, then the next year they go 9-8 again, and now you're looking into 2026, trying to start over with a new young quarterback after winning maybe one playoff game with Russell Wilson. I just think if you play it out, the end game of keeping Russell Wilson was never going to work out based on the player we were seeing on the field. In general, I was totally in support of the Russell Wilson acquisition, but he's falling off a cliff. He's aging in dog years. We see that now in Pittsburgh. We saw it when he first got to Denver. He wasn't the same player. And so if you delay the inevitable, everyone knows, I think we can all agree, Broncos country, the only way you can win in this league is you have a quarterback coach mix that fits. And typically the way you win and win for a long time is have a quarterback under a rookie deal. Because once you pay the quarterback, and San Francisco is going to see this with Purdy, if they pay him $45-50 million, I like Purdy. He's a good quarterback. You're going to lose some weapons. And can that guy now go win off script? Can he win in the fourth quarter on the road when he doesn't have the same weapons? And that's why, as painful as this process has been for the last year and a half at times, and awkward and cringy, I think the Broncos are on the right track with the right coach, the right quarterback, where they need to be. Where if Harbaugh stayed, I love Jim Harbaugh as a coach and just the way he turns programs around, the way he sets it and creates a culture, and the way he eats, sleeps football. I just think in this particular case, he would have held on tightly to Russell Wilson to make it work. And ultimately that would have set the Broncos back, that we're playing Russell this year and they're playing him in 2025 and then trying to start over in 2026. I could be wrong. Maybe Harbaugh at that point decides that he's going to go get J.J. McCarthy in the draft because he loved him. He's like a son to him. Maybe. I just they didn't really have the picks to do that, if you remember, because of the Russell Wilson trade. So who has it better? I think as it sits here today, you can argue that Harbaugh is a better coach. The better situation is for the Broncos to be with Sean Payton and Bo Nix rather than Jim Harbaugh trying to resurrect and revive in the career of Russell Wilson over a 2-3 year span. So in this instance, who has it better? I'd say Sean Payton. Well, how are the Broncos going to beat the Chargers this week? A 2-2 Chargers team coming off a bye? It's pretty simple. And I'll get to that after the break. It's never a bad time to enhance the home. It's getting cool out. You want to keep those doors closed tightly. That's where glass doors can add a nice touch. Looks great, keeps the house cool, keeps it warm, whatever you want. Jamie Haig knows all about it. He and his wife, Lisa, run RBJ Glass. It's a family business. They pride themselves on customer service, honesty, and integrity. We put a sliding glass door in our house. We absolutely love it. Jamie stands behind his work at RBJ. They install European shower enclosures, standard shower glass. They do mirrors, window and glass replacement, insulated doggy doors, office cubicles, and small commercial storefronts. They have competitive prices and offer discounts to veterans, senior citizens, and have even accommodated single parents. So what are you waiting for? Give my friend Jamie a call. It's Jamie of RBJ Glass, 720-883-3144, or email Jamie at rbjglass2017@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Broncos Pod with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck, from the Denver Post. And I'm looking through a story. I want to make sure I have my stats right on this run the rock kind of game that the Broncos are facing. And Ryan McFadden, my colleague from the Denver Post, he titled it well in his headline. It's an old school matchup. As I said, it's going to be physical. It's going to be bloody noses. It's going to be bloody knuckles, hand in the ground. That's what this game's going to be. Because you look at it. How do the Broncos win this game? Run the ball and slow the run. They're not going to stop the run of the Chargers, but you run the ball and slow the run. The Chargers rank 9th in rushing yards, 128 yards a game, and they run 53% of the time. That is so crazy when you think they have Justin Herbert at quarterback, and they are running 53% of the time. Now, Herbert has not been healthy. He dealt with plantar fasciitis in the preseason. Now he's dealing with an ankle sprain. I think that's part of it. But he's throwing for like 180 yards a game. This is the guy who used to fall out of bed and throw for 350. But I don't think he's healthy. I think that's part of the way the game's being called. Their line's getting healthy. The tackle's back. They're going to run the ball. They're going to run the ball. And you're going to recognize some of these names, especially if you follow college football. J.K. Dobbins, the former Raven, he's playing better. Now, the last 2 games, not so much, but early in the season, he was a workhorse. And then they got Gus the Bus Bradley. But Denver has been much improved against the run. At this point last year, they were giving up almost 175 yards on the ground. And they get to this point this year, and Denver has improved dramatically. This is a team that's allowing only 111 yards per game and 8th in yards per play at 4 yards. It's just you cannot say enough good things right now about how Vance Joseph, and maybe a little bit of a cap tip to Jim Leonhard, I don't want to go overboard here, but the way they've created a secondary that can cover every different coverage. You can trust man coverage with Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, and Patrick Surtain. It's allowing them to blitz because you can leave guys on islands and send extra bodies at the quarterback. You can run blitz through that. It's just created chaos schematically for opposing offenses. And when you are a one-dimensional team in the NFL, it's very hard to win. The Ravens get away with it sometimes because Lamar Jackson's threat of throwing while running is so unique. You see a little bit of that with Jaden Daniels with Washington. What a game that's going to be this week. But if the Broncos can slow the run, they can beat the Chargers. And they're going to have to run the ball. I said this, boring Bo is not bad for the Broncos. That's in my column that ran on Thursday. Column today is about if they're in this thing, they got to go get T. Higgins or go get a weapon to help with the development of Bo Nix and just to get to the playoffs and winning record. You cannot be satisfied with where you are offensively. But boring Bo is not bad for the Broncos. 7 signing seagulls swam silently seaward. That's an old Brady Bunch reference for those of you who are my age. Listen, when you look at this, the Broncos are improving on the ground. Javonte Williams has shown life these last few weeks. He's had his best 2 weeks in basically a calendar year. And he's showing some of that confidence and swagger. Feed me more after a big play. He wants it. He's showing some burst. The line is double teaming up front. They're not panicking on blocks and missing assignments like they were earlier in the year. So I kind of like what we're seeing out of Javonte and that jitterbug movement from Jaleel McLaughlin. The Chargers' rush defense is good. They're solid. They have been a top 10 defense. These teams mirror each other in so many ways. But it's going to be a grinded out game. And this is the type of game where Bo Nix could throw for 150 yards and you can win because one of those strikes should be a play action score, either to Marvin Mims or Troy Franklin. Because you're going to run the ball. They're going to run the ball. You keep bringing those safeties up. You keep getting them closer to the line of scrimmage with the linebackers. Then all of a sudden, play action, a little double move, and that's where you got to hit it. Last week they had it to Franklin. Bo said he overthrew it. I still say Franklin, an NFL player, you got to catch that ball. But this is going to be that type of game. So how do they win? Vance Joseph, they're going to need him huge this week in terms of stopping the run. Make Herbert beat you. Now, again, that's not always a great plan, but Herbert has never played particularly well against the Broncos, if we're being honest, or this scheme, the version of the scheme from Vic Fangio. Some of his worst games are against the scheme because the zone coverage seems to confuse him more than most against the Broncos over the last 3-4 years. But Bo Nix, his first college game, he beat Justin Herbert when Herbert was Oregon. I remember watching that game, and he threw a touchdown pass that the name's escaping me to a guy who was a receiver on the Broncos briefly. But Auburn beat Oregon in that game. Close game, down to the wire. It was an ugly game offensively that day as well for both teams, especially Auburn, and Nix found a way. And I see something similar playing out today, on Sunday. Low scoring, field position game. Broncos have been one of the best special teams so far. You saw it last week with the returns with Mims. what he can do in terms of flipping a field, get you an extra 20 yards. This is a game they can win. So you got to run the rock, you got to stop the run or slow it, and go, Bo, go. And go, Bo, go means one play probably. One play that gets you into field goal range, one play that's off play action to get you a touchdown, one play maybe it's a naked boot and he runs for 25 yards. That's how close and low scoring this is, where the team that runs the best and stops the run is going to win. And for me, because the Broncos are at home, if they were on the road, I'd pick against them on this case. I believe they're going to win by a field goal. 18-15. This isn't the Raiders. The Raiders melted down. Jim Harbaugh teams don't melt down. They're going to stay in the game because they're disciplined. They're playing very similar to the Broncos. And they're coming off a bye week. That's a danger. But it's on the road for the Chargers. And Herbert, for me, just isn't right. He just isn't. And now this could be the game he gets right physically. But watching him, he doesn't look like himself. And the Broncos are capable defensively right now against a limited Herbert and Gus Bradley, J.K. Dobbins. They're capable of winning that type of matchup. I think they will. So, folks, have fun with it. It's Sean Payton versus Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh could have been here with your team and probably hanging on with Russell Wilson. And instead, you got Sean Payton, Bo Nix, and you got a defense that is absolutely nasty. And that defense has a chance to get him to 4-2. And here comes the prodigal son, Sean Payton, returning to New Orleans on a Thursday night. You don't think it's a big deal? Amazon last night, when they put up the player profiles, shows Cam Jordan from the Saints and Sean Payton from the Broncos. They don't even bother using a profile of a player. It's the coach who won a Super Bowl and changed the course of history with that franchise would be going home at 4-2. Are you kidding me? I love it. We always thought that the juiciest game on the schedule was going to be Russell Steelers against the Broncos. He couldn't make the bell because of injury. Now it becomes, if they win that Saints game with a chance to go to 6-2 at the halfway point, make a move at the deadline, Broncos country, your team could be relevant again. And they are on their way, and I think they will be 4-2 after this Sunday. Folks, I can't thank you enough for all your support of this podcast. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Apple. You can find it on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. The support means everything. I could not do this without Big A behind the screen. He's trying to figure out ways to go see his Mets, hoping it's at Dodger Stadium. Maybe he's going to be spending $10,000 to go watch the Yankees Mets in a World Series, but he's loving life right now, as he should. Baseball October is the best. I could not do it without him, without Nate Lundy of Mile High Sports, Jamie Haig of RBJ Glass, Bet Online, and of course, my A1 from day one, Darby Hoggett. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.